Welcome back to another episode of the Empowerful Health Podcast. I'm the host, Dr. J, and I've got two great guests today, fellow chiropractors, Dr. Todd and Dr. Carson. So tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do.
So I'm Dr. Todd Beck, originally from Southeast Idaho, but have been down here in Arizona for about 2 years. We own and operate Edified Chiropractic, which is a neurologically based chiropractic office in Gilbert, just north of downtown Gilbert.
Mike, my name is Dr. Carson Wild, originally from Utah. And then Dr. Todd and I actually met in chiropractic school out in Texas. And then that's when we decided to open our office together, Edified Chiropractic, like you mentioned, in Gilbert. My father is actually a chiropractor as well, so I grew up with it and absolutely love it.
That's awesome. So you've been under chiropractic care your whole life then?
My entire life from day one. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you both on the podcast and literally right down the street. So
Exactly.
have a practice, 3-4 miles on the same road kind of thing. So glad to have you here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about like reactive versus proactive, especially kind of the mix. You know, you grew up with chiropractic, with holistic health, and you did not. You know, you grew up in a different environment, so you've been able to like share that with that experience with your patients and help teach them a little bit more about being proactive. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? Some of the things that you've learned, kind of contrasting your upbringings?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we talk to a lot of our practice members about is the difference, right, between proactive and reactive when it comes to health and wellness. People will come in, they're used to when they have ache, pain, dysfunction, right? They go to their doctor and first thing they're recommended is a prescription, right? A medication. We know that it'll allow them to feel better temporarily, right? Masks the symptom, but the underlying root cause remains. Right?
Yeah. Why does it hurt? It's not
Exactly.
because you're Tylenol deficient. Right?
Exactly. Right. We often joke headaches aren't due to a deficiency
Right.
in Tylenol. Right. But that's become the way that our healthcare system works.
Sure.
And so that's what a lot of them are used to. And so it is an educating or a re-educating process of what the difference truly is. You touched on kind of our difference in upbringing. So as a son of a chiropractor, I was adjusted from day one. I thought everybody's dad was a chiropractor,
Right.
and would go in for their weekly adjustments
Sure.
Fridays after school. But for me, my experience was very, very different in that I recognized there was a difference in terms of like symptomatology or how often I was getting sick compared to a lot of my classmates. I often joke with Doc and other people that come into our office that I actually got jealous of other kiddos because they got to miss school.
Free days.
Yeah, they got to
can
stay home
play
with
video
mom,
games,
play
watch
video
Wheel
games.
of Fortune, all
Exactly.
that stuff.
My show is The Price is Right.
There you go. That's a good one.
So I actually got jealous because I never got sick.
Sure.
And I would kind of complain about it to my parents sometimes. I'm like, oh, I think I need to stay home. Like, I have a cough, you know? But it's one of those things that I just wasn't something I experienced. And then as I continue to grow older, recognizing other friends, you know, having headaches, low back pain, sporting injuries, digestive issues, a lot of things that I wasn't experiencing. And the only difference that I could pinpoint between our lifestyles was consistent chiropractic care.
Sure. And one of the things like I like to note on that too is that when you're a chiropractic family, you tend to think more holistically overall, you know, so it's not just get adjusted, you're going to not get sick, your kids are going to be great. It's part of a whole lifestyle. Your parents probably weren't taking you to McDonald's and Dairy Queen and all these sorts of things. On top of that, there were probably supplements in the home, good nutrients, all this to add to the whole system. So once you start being proactive in one area, it tends to bleed over into other areas as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything about the other
Contrast?
side of the aisle?
Yeah,
So-
I would say just echoing off that, it really is a process, right? If you want to be more proactive about your health and about your family's life, you can't just quit cold turkey everything, right? Because
100%.
it's a lot and it can become overwhelming, and then you just stop doing it altogether because it feels like too much all at once. And
Well, this
so
literally happens every January 1st, right? New Year's
Yep.
resolutions. I'm going to change everything. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to stop doing X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And January 6th, suddenly we're not doing any of those anymore.
Yep.
You know?
and everybody's on their own health journey and their process from going to this reactive approach that is kind of ingrained in society, right, to being much more proactive, and it has to be kind of a process over time. So I did not grow up in a chiropractic home. I was in the house that, if you had a sniffle, Claritin, right?
Sure.
If you had a neck ache or low back pain, you took a pill.
Right.
And growing up, that was just kind of the normal, right? Something that everybody growing up, we had aches, pains, and dysfunctions.
Sure.
And there was a medicine cabinet full of pills that we took, right? And so coming from the other side of the spectrum, not growing up in a chiropractic home, high school, starting to experience migraine headaches, right?
Sure.
It was interesting that as I started to experience those, that the only difference was getting adjusted, right? There was no other change that I was making, but chiropractic care stopped those, right?
Nice.
And then going for a period of 12 years without experiencing a migraine headache just proves the point that as you get adjusted on a regular basis and are more proactive, your nervous system becomes much more resilient. We often talk a lot in the office about, because we love kiddos, we love serving pediatrics, and just talking about this idea of, as a family, making the decision that you're going to be more proactive.
Right.
And it's fun to have both examples of what that looks like on both sides of the spectrum.
That is cool. I want to touch on something here that you didn't mention, but kind of was thinking about is when we're trying to shift that as families, say a parent has 5 kids at home, they're all various ages, and they're starting to think more proactively, there's this tendency to feel guilty about the way we did it before. And there's a resistance to that. Like, oh no, it can't be what we're doing, what we're eating, what we're thinking about. It can't be that I didn't take them to a chiropractor sooner, because if it is, then it's my fault. And there's that guilt. And it's like, we're all a work in progress. We're all trying to make shifts and changes to be more proactive. We're talking health here, but this applies to every aspect of life. Business, success, how much money we have, what type of car we drive, all of that has to do with how reactive or proactive we were or are now or were 10 years ago, right? Where we're at. And so I see that with some parents that they don't want to see that it was maybe something they didn't do that's caused their children pain, because that's not how it works. Like, we're all learning, and we're going to learn something at some point and start changing then. And if we let go of the guilt of how we did it and just embrace a new way of thinking, that's where paradigm shifts can become more positive and proactive, right?
We often use the phrase that you were doing the best with the information you had, right?
Yep.
And so it's not meant to be this guilt trip that you come into the office, we talk about, you should have been doing this from day one with your kiddo, right?
100%.
It's much more of a conversation of, this is the impact of stress that's taken place on your kiddo's life that's gotten to them to this point. And now that you know better, you know more, right? What are you going to do now today to make that change so that 10 years down the road, we're seeing progress and we're seeing adaptation?
Absolutely. Yep. I love to tell patients that, like, hey, you're not in a great place now, but if this goes unchecked, where are you going to be in 20 years? Like, let's do stuff now. Let's make changes now to do it. Yes, it would have been great to see it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but it's even better. It's not even better. It's the next best thing is to see you now and continue on from there. Yeah, these are great points you guys are making. So you've been working together, sharing that contrast. What's some of the biggest things you see parents are trying to do that they don't completely understand? Like, what's some of the stuff you're teaching often to parents about children and healthcare?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest things that we're teaching is that information that Doc mentioned, right? We know that healthy kids grow into healthy adults, right? And so the sooner they can start those changes, the better that's going to be long term. But one thing that we like to point out to parents as well is kids don't grow out of anything, right? A lot of times other healthcare providers will tell them, oh, your baby has chronic ear infections, right? Is a colicky baby. They'll just grow out of that. One thing we know is that kids grow into something else, right? As they grow older, that can develop and become something that bothers them in a different way, or different ache, different symptom, different dysfunction. And so because we understand that developmentally with their nervous system, that we need to make a trajectory switch, right? Have a positive input into their nervous system and its function at a younger age, it's going to allow the long-term benefit. So I think that re-educating process as well, with parents and their kiddos saying that, like, hey, we need to think about some of these things that they're experiencing in a different way and be more proactive with resolving or working on it now compared to later.
Really like that whole wait and see, or we'll grow out of it. Adults do it like, well, it'll go away on its own.
Right.
And the symptom may, but the problem that caused the symptom doesn't. It's still there. And I like how you said that it may grow into something else. So often kids who had ear infections as a baby or as a toddler now have headaches or migraines as a teenager. And then as an adult, they have chronic neck pain and back pain. And so like it shifts into other areas because the body grows, but that dysfunction is still there and needs to be addressed.
And often for kiddos, like they're not able to maybe express those things, right? Because they're less musculoskeletal. That's not much of a pain, but the underlying function of their nervous system, that's what we're focusing on.
Sure.
And things that aren't as easy to express, and especially newborns, right? They can't share a lot of what they're experiencing.
All they can do is scream.
All they can do is scream, right? We talk about babies' three main functions being to, eat, sleep, and poop.
Right.
Right. And so like we're able to metric and see how they're functioning in those ways, but there's so much more. And we want to make sure that as they're going through those developmental years specifically, that they're able to do so and thrive.
And there's also, so on top of that, like they can't express it, but then even as you get into teenagers, like pain can be normal. Like dysfunction is normal, so they don't know that it can be any different. As a teenager, I had neck pain, headaches, and back pain for a long, long time. I actually couldn't remember them starting. I met chiropractic in my 20s and had these issues for a while. And I remember just thinking it was part of life. My dad had back issues, so I assumed, I probably have the same Kerrigan back. My grandma had issues, so I just assumed this genetics until I actually experienced it not being there. It was a big difference. I had a patient recently. He texted me after his first adjustment. He said, I didn't realize that it shouldn't hurt to run. Like I've been running and it hurts. And I went running after the adjustment. Now that everything's lined up, it didn't hurt. I'm like, yeah, we just get used to dysfunction and dysfunction becomes normal. And that's where someone like you guys and myself come in, is to help people realize dysfunction's not normal. And if we just ignore it, it's going to progressively get worse. Anything you want to add?
We use the phrase common, not normal. Right? This may be common for you,
sure.
But it's definitely not normal for you to be experiencing this. And when we were talking about, when Dr. Carson was talking about just different things that we educate about kiddos, one thing that we also talk about is the 3 T's of subluxation, right?
Yep.
So traumas, toxins, and thoughts. And especially for a newborn baby, right? Parents may be a little bit hesitant and say, what stress could they possibly have experienced that would require them to go to a chiropractor, right? And we talk a lot about birth trauma, right?
Oh, yes.
Regardless of the method that is used during birth, it is traumatic for both mom and baby, right? And so there's a lot of twisting, tugging, and pulling that happens to baby's neck, regardless, again, of the way that birth process occurs. And so we have twins that are some little kiddos that are under care in our office. And it's really interesting to see the difference between the two of them and how birth must have been much more traumatic for the other because their personalities are different, their ability to sprawl out and relax, right? Versus being curled up and in a tight round up ball,
Everything kind of tight.
And different digestion things, latching issues, right? So all of those things, they haven't experienced they haven't been in a car accident, right? They haven't had a slip or a fall. The one thing that they have experienced is
right.
So we can't forget the impact that can also have on our ability to function.
When there's so much medicalization of birth, it's a very natural process, but it's not happening naturally. And there's so many interventions. Pitocin is a great example. You get Pitocin given to moms, which intensifies contractions, putting more stress on a baby's spine. You get really long, drawn-out births. I always tell people it's your mom complained, I was in labor for 36 hours with you, holding that over them. Those long, drawn-out births, or the really fast, intense births, or if they use any kind of interceptions, a forceps, a vacuum to try to pull the baby out, there's a lot of that. Or you get a big baby, a 10-pound baby, and a mom that weighed 102 pounds before she got pregnant. There's a lot of compression that can happen in those situations to lead to that. Funny though, because if you talk to the moms, you're like, well, isn't birth traumatic? And every one of them's like, oh, yes, but they don't think about how that impacts the baby, because we don't think about the babies often, at least in that way,
And I forget the exact time frame, but I believe it's 6 months after a baby's born, they still feel they're a part of mom.
Oh, interesting.
Right? There's a time period after birth when baby still feels a part of mom. And so we also have to think about emotional stress too, right? So maternal stress, whether that be family, work, or social pressures throughout those 9 months of pregnancy, are also going to impact baby's health and function, including after birth as well.
There's so much to that, what mom's thinking about, what she's doing, what's going on between mom and dad, the interdynamics, because kids at that stage are purely emotions. That's all they are, right before they're born, after they're born. It's just an emotional creature, and they're picking up on that, and it can have an impact, which goes into the thoughts, It's so much easier to understand thoughts in adults. When we're stressed out, the shoulders do this, all those muscles attach into the spine and pull it out of alignment. It's pretty straightforward. I always joke that stress keeps me in business. Like I see a lot more people because stress pulls them out. Otherwise I could adjust them and they'd go for months without needing another adjustment, but stress pulls them out sooner than that, right?
Love that. That's great.
Well, then to hit that, so obviously traumas, injuries, accidents, birth trauma, thoughts, what we're thinking about, what's going on around us, that stress, the traumas we've experienced emotionally, and then toxins, just what's chemically going on in the body. If we're eating junk food stuff constantly, our body's not in a calm state to maintain homeostasis and spinal alignment as well.
Talk the 3 T's all the time
Nice.
in our office.
Excellent. Yeah, that's such a big part of it, and I like that idea of looking towards kids and seeing how is that affecting that. I have 5 children myself. I've adjusted, so I wasn't a chiropractor until I had the 3rd kid, so the 3 younger ones have gotten adjusted since they were young. Kids tend to hold their adjustments well. My kids get adjusted every several months, but my 4th kid, oddly enough, was a C-section, and when he came out, I checked his alignment. Everything looked great. He did fabulous. Actually, he held that. He didn't need an adjustment at all until he was about 8 or 9 months old. And I checked him quite regularly. Everything stayed in place, and it was a dirt road. So we went on a dirt road with the washboards, and he was back in his car seat asleep and his head just flapping all over the place. We think of kids being resilient, and he was. He didn't wake up and be like, "Oh, Dad, I have a headache." Grandy's 9 months old, but he was. I checked him, and he was out of alignment. I adjusted him. He's my most dramatic kid now, but I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But
it was the dirt road.
It was
for
the
sure.
dirt
Yeah,
road.
the dirt
It just
road.
threw off his whole karma or whatever. So, any other things you'd like to add to this topic? I really like what you guys are sharing about what you teach patients. So,
Just going back to the toxins again, going back to medications.
sure.
A lot of what we put into our body masks one symptom, but again, we kind of initiate a cascade of events that occur because it takes us out of homeostasis. A foreign something that we're taking into our body that really does upset the way that we're able to function. Just wanted to add that too.
I had a patient the other day. She'd taken something, and it was for like a area specific problem. And she asked this question. She's like, "How does it know to go there?" I'm like, that's the key with medication. It doesn't. When you're taking something like a steroid orally, it doesn't know that your shoulder's the problem. It just goes everywhere, and it's impacting every system in the body. And so that's where some of this other stuff, you get other things down the road, or just not even just that, you're just not able to adapt to the environment around you, which is the key of life. The key of our being is the adaptability. If we're able to adapt to what happens to us, then we're fine. Even like injuries. I've had patients have injuries come in and still be okay spinal wise because the injury wasn't too much and their body's resilience was enough that it matched that and they were able to handle the injury without breaking down physically, right? And so the same kind of concept, the more we can strengthen and stabilize the body so it's able to adapt, the better. And when we're putting medications, Dairy Queen, nothing against Dairy Queen, hopefully they don't sue me for that, but I'm not against it, like occasional. But if we're eating McDonald's every day, if we're stressed out all the time, if we're doing all these things, our body's ability to adapt to a new stressor hits us a lot more. It's like the people when there's a loud noise. I was somewhere recently and lightning struck and then the thunder was super loud. And my system, I had been stressed that day, was the most on edge. And I jumped out of my chair and everyone else was just chilling, their systems were in a better place than mine to adapt to that. So the more we get our whole system calmed down, and this starts as kids, I shouldn't say it starts, it's better to start as kids and teach them these skills to do that.
I just want to echo that too, the importance of being resilient. And that's what being proactive with all things in health, especially chiropractic care, is all about, because people will come in, there's things that need to be corrected, right? Aches, pains, and dysfunctions. But the moment those are gone, we need to continue with that lifestyle at a less often frequency, right? To not only maintain, but to be proactive so that when those future stressors come, your body's like, I've got this.
Right.
It bounces back so much faster. And I think that can be very comforting for a parent as well, not knowing what stressors are going to impact your child in their lifetime. But what things do you have control over? And we often say we focus mainly on the nervous system because that's the master system of the body. It allows your body to be adaptive, be dynamic to those stressors. So it's almost just like giving yourself a leg up for the future as a parent for your kids to say, hey, whether it's physical, chemical, or emotional, I know my kids are going to be able to handle it better because their nervous system is better regulating now.
That's huge. One of the things that we want as parents is for our kids to be okay in the world, you know? And sometimes we think that that's protecting them from problems, and it really isn't. It's not. It's giving them the tools to deal with that, you know? So if every time our child has a problem, we immediately go to a medication, then the kid learns that they need something else to fix problems for them. And so training them that, hey, there's things you can do. I remember as a kid, a teenager, I had a headache, you know, and I went to the school nurse looking for Advil because that's what we did in my home growing up. And she's like, well, no, lay down here with your eyes closed for a little while. I'm like, but no, my mom gives me Advil and it goes away, you know? And I was still, obviously hadn't learned at that point that why is the headache there? Did my body need to rest? Did I need to recover from something? What was happening that I needed to calm the system down? And this nurse knew that, or at least somewhat knew that, you know? And so giving our kids not just a way out of a problem, but tools to work through a problem to get to the other side is a skill that is vital for every parent to teach. And so many of them aren't teaching that nowadays. I mean, just look at society in general. How many problems would be solved if we taught kids to solve their own problems, right?
Love that.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you being here today. This has been great having you on. Tell us, what's the name of your practice again?
It's Edified
Chiropractic.
Yep.
Okay.
We're located just north of downtown Gilbert.
Excellent. So, yeah, thank you for having you. Thanks. Thanks for being on the podcast today. Appreciate you both. What's your website? EdifiedChiropractic.com.
EdifiedChiroAZ.com.
There we go. EdifiedChiroAZ.com. Thanks again for being on here. And yeah, great.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for following the podcast today. We're glad to have these guys on, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.